Thanks, Michael, and thank you. And I welcome the Minister's new paper that's coming out that's going to be critically important. It's long overdue. We've been waiting for this, Minister, and hope it's strong enough, hope it's revolutionary enough, because we really have to realise that we have to go through a transformation in energy in this country. We are the laggards of Europe. We're the laggards in Europe when it comes to energy. We import 6.5 billion in energy every year. Over the last 10 years, we imported over 55 billion, 55,000 million left this country over the last 10 years in the imports of oil, gas and coal. Over the next 10 years, the way we're going, Minister, we will be very likely importing, the way we're on, the business as usual, unless we do a massive change, 70 to 80 billion will leave this economy on the imports of oil, gas and coal. 70 to 80 billion. We need to kind of realise how incredibly serious this issue is. We are 2.5 times the import of the average person in Europe, per person in Ireland. We import on average 1,400 euros per every individual of oil, gas and coal into this country. The average in Europe is 600 euros. We're way out of line with the rest of Europe when it comes to energy, and we're incredibly reliant on fuels that are going to be very volatile as we move into the next decade. We see what's happening in Ukraine, we see what's happening, if you like, in the Middle East, and we seem to be kind of living as if these things aren't happening or they're not real. We're at massive risk of security of supply of energy in the south of Ireland, and I presume across the border too. And before I say anything more, by the way, I welcome the fact that this is an all-Ireland and a cross-border initiative, because this sort of collaboration, cross-border, sharing ideas, technologies, and working together, because we need to work together on this island. We're too small to operate independently. We need each other badly. So a conference like this, right here on the border, to me is a critically important initiative, and I'm fully in support of this sort of activity here in this country. But it must get down into real actions. And when you look at that in terms of that exposure to energy and the amount of jobs, the Minister mentioned it, Michael mentioned it there too, that the job numbers, we're talking about probably in the order of 100,000 jobs per year for the next 30, 40 years in this industry in Ireland if we were to transform. And that means strong measures, and I'll come back to those measures later. But we look at the bigger issue. Climate change is the biggest issue that civilization has ever had to face. And to me, it is the issue that we cannot ignore any longer. We're heading for a 4 to 6 degree rise in global mean surface temperature in this century. And by 2050, unless we make this massive transformation now, there will not be a future for our children. I'm looking at these young people here that have come from Cooley. These are the children, these are the generation that we need to be looking to. And we need to be realising that we need to make sure that we give that generation the flourishing lifestyles and prospects that we've enjoyed in our lifetime. And the way we're going, we've already put the next generation in debt with this massive debt that's been left to them. But now we have this much bigger issue of climate change hovering over us that is going to be incredibly. Next Monday, by the way, is the release of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change next report, a part of AR5. And that is going to shock us, the science of climate change and what's coming. And that is peer-reviewed. 99% of scientists in the world have signed up to it. There's no debate, there's no confusion, there's no uncertainty about climate change. It's real, it's man-made, it's caused by us. Our greenhouse gas emissions, we're putting up into the atmosphere now at 400 parts per million. Remember, for 500,000 years, it never went above 280 parts per million. It ranged from between 180 and 280 parts per million. And for 3 million years, at least 3 million years, it never reached the 400 parts per million of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere we're at today. And Ireland is performing extremely badly, north and south, by the way. We are incredibly bad relative to Europe in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions per person. We're 1.5 times the European average. It is, when I go to Europe or go to Brussels and I'm speaking at conferences there, I feel embarrassed to be Irish, because everybody knows at these conferences where we are and in terms of our emissions. We have to wean off fossil fuels urgently. And I hope, Minister, your measures in your paper are going to be at the level that we have to do this urgently, and it has to be done with measures that will drive the change. There's an awful lot of people in this room working hard in this area and that have been frustrated over the years in trying to get projects going with bottlenecks everywhere, blocking them in every way, whether it's to do with feed-in tariffs not being good enough and just not good enough to drive the change that's needed and to kickstart where we need to go, or whether it's feed-in tariffs, or whether it's power purchase agreements or grid connections or other issues like planning permissions and other things that are blocking where we need to go. And we need to overcome these barriers and move quickly into this new situation. And we need to make sure that all of our citizens buy into this change, because otherwise we're going to see over the next 10 years a massive drain of the best of this country leaving this country. We're going to see more and more emigration from this country. And if we want to stop that, what's happening, we have to put measures in place that will address this issue. And energy is critically the most important of all issues that we have to face. I mean, I can talk about the public sector, both north and south. We have to engage in green public procurement. Over the last year in the Republic, the public sector spent 9 billion on purchases of products, goods and services. 9 billion. Over the last 10 years, they spent over 100 billion. How much of that money went into long-term sustainable infrastructure solutions to where we are? Over the next 10 years, we're likely to see another 100 billion spent by the public service. Is that money going to be spent the right way? Is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to comply with the European Directive on Green Public Procurement, or is it not? Because practically none of it is being spent the right way at the moment. I did a programme on it this year, and I was appalled at how little I found in the public sector, whether we're talking about the health sector, we're talking about the education sector, right across the various sectors of the public area. There is very, very little going on in the public sector in this area. And Bob, I think this is something that needs to be noted. And I am going to be speaking out a lot about this issue from now on. I'm now, by the way, I need to say something. I'm moving beyond television because I find I'm too blocked within dealing with, if you like, the level I can speak out through television. And I have to speak out. I'm at an age now that I need to be able to kind of come out more cleanly on these issues and inform the public where they need to know. I've spent 21 years doing television programs, over 400 programs, and I don't know if I'm making any difference. But all I know is that we as a society and our young generation deserve this waking up that we need to go through. And when I look at this issue now today, I mean, we can talk about energy efficiency in the wider context and how much we need to do with retrofitting buildings and all of the energy efficiency. But today we're focused on a very important area, which is biomass. And that means bioenergy, basically, in terms of wood energy, energy crops, and all the solutions that we need to go there. Now, if we look at the situation in our homes even, what percentage do you think of renewable energy is being used in our home today relative to the full energy demand? What would you think? You know, renewable energy, that could be solar energy, biomass, you know, wood energy. It could be wind, you know, for some of those in the country. What percentage would you think? Well, it's 1.6%. Well, that's what the figure was in 2011. That's SEAI's figures. 1.6%. Oil is the dominant fuel. Electricity, obviously, is 25% of our home energy. And then we've gas, and then we've got coal, peat, briquettes, these sort of fuels. And bear in mind that oil now is 1.5 times the price of wood energy. And it's twice the price of energy when it comes to commercial scale. If you're a hotel, if you're a business, if you're a local authority, and you convert from oil because if oil is only your fuel for heating, then biomass is less than half the price. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And yet, we're very, very slow to make this change. If only 1.6% in 2011 was renewable, it's a shocking indictment on us as a society when we are not aware that all of that rest of those fuels, 90% of them are imported and draining our economy and draining us of jobs. And when you look at the opportunities here in doing so, and there are some really good people going to be speaking, see the lineup of both speakers from North and South here today that are going to be speaking on the practical ways that we can apply these technologies and how we can all engage in this. Remember, we're in an economy, green economy, that is expanding at a massive rate globally. The green economy is growing as the biggest growth globally at the moment. Its value at the moment globally is 5 trillion. And we need to realise that we need to get in as part of this initiative. We need to be up there and availing of it. Because right across Europe, every other country is moving very rapidly with these areas. I film across Europe and I see what they're doing in Austria, in Germany, in Sweden, in all of these countries, Denmark. They are miles ahead of us. And we need to learn from these countries. And we need to kind of move quickly and take the initiatives that they did that drove the change. We need to put a very high price on fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is destroying us. We need to put a very heavy price on it, and we need to make sure that that money isn't going into paying off the zombie banks or developers that greedily destroyed us over the last 10 years. We need to make sure that money is ring-fenced, and it's ring-fenced to go into the solutions and to incentivize all of what you in this room here are trying to do. If we put a good price on fossil fuel, and bear in mind it's not just in terms of the carbon emissions and the damage it's doing that way, but it's also the jobs losses to this country, the draining of that money out of our local economies, the health implications of those fossil fuels in terms of the pollution emissions from these, coal especially. I mean, health implications, the number of people that die from coal in our towns in Ireland is still very high. And we need to wake up that this fuel is not for us. We have to drain it, get away from it. And I hear talk about exploration around the country, of more exploration for oil and gas. Forget it. It's past tense. If there is oil there, it has to be kept in the ground. And we need to go to the energies that are going to give a future to our next generation. And that is renewable energy, but mostly energy efficiency. And Mairead, I see you're in Europe, and you know how Europe is driving this very fast. But you have to know that we haven't, and our governments and our political parties have not been engaging. Neither have the civil service have been engaging in this issue. And I'm saying, and I'm speaking out because I want to speak honestly and about fact, about what is the realities here. We look at the opportunities in any part of Ireland, and you can see forest residue, thinnings, and the potential of it. Now, if we want to maximise the benefit of that residue, we can't be putting it into coal-firing power plants, peat power plants, that are incredibly inefficient. That's not a solution. We have to use that fuel to replace oil for heating. That's where it's needed. And that means putting district heating into our towns. Any town that doesn't have natural gas has to have district heating. It's essential. All over Europe, if you take every town in Austria, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, every city, they all have district heating. People buy heat. They don't buy fuel. They don't have boilers in their homes. And that's the model in urban areas we need to go to. And that brings certainty, because if you put district heating into a town, then the farmers around that town know that there is a value for growing forestry and thinning, or growing short rotation willow crops, or other types of annual crops for energy, whether it's straw or machanthus, other crops. But we need to put the ingredients in place, and we have to stop expanding natural gas. If we put natural gas in, we don't know if we'll have natural gas in 10 years' time. It's a massive uncertainty. We're on the end of a pipeline in a very risky global economy where oil and gas are going to become incredibly difficult and uncertain in the future. And we don't know all those gas lines that we put in. What will we do with them in 10 years' time if there isn't gas? And the International Energy Agency warned us in their 5-year review about being over-dependent on natural gas. Now we need to move to biomethane, and we have an incredible opportunity with biomethane. And I'm very glad to see that Bord Gáis is very keen on moving into that space with biomethane from biogas and injecting it into the grid and converting trucks and heavy goods vehicles and tractors into biogas. And here's an opportunity for farmers. And farmers forming cooperatives around these biogas and biomethane plants, to me, is the solution for our transport fuel. It's a really important part of the mix. Now, obviously, there's all sorts of other things we need to do for transport. But when we look at energy, we've got power, heat, and transport. 1/3 of our energy is spent on heat, 1/3 on power, and 1/3 on transport. And we import all 100% of our transport fuel. We need to wake up to that opportunity of making a huge change in breaking that connection with petrol and diesel and moving into either electrification with our transport on one side, which is badly needed, and biomethane. When you look across Europe, nearly all of the bus fleets in the cities of Europe, from Stockholm to Vienna are running on biogas. You know, why are we not doing it? Why is CIE not doing it? We need to speak out about these things because we have and are living in a country where we have the most unsustainable ways of doing things. And it's quite clear why we're importing so much fuel. And it's quite clear why we are burning so much carbon emissions because of what we're doing. And we have to wake up, and our public sector need to know, and we need to speak out and be honest. And we have to stop praising ourselves for doing small little efforts. Of course we've got to make all these small efforts, but we have to make this mainstream. And it's urgent, because every year we miss out, we're falling further behind, and the further behind, the harder it is going to be to catch up. Because it's like going down a vortex, and it's going to be harder to get up out of that hole. And we've left it very late, and we've seen the last 10, 15 years of inaction. And we've seen it in this now with the present government. For the last 2.5 years, they've done nothing, absolutely nothing in this space. And we need to wake up, and Maureen, you need to get that back to your party and say, why are you not doing it? I think Fergus came today, honestly, and wants to do something. He genuinely does, and I think he is going to deliver something. The question is he going to deliver something that is going to be radical enough and that we as a society will buy into and that we all relate to and understand this is the vision, this is where we need to go. Because if we don't do this, we are going to be left behind, and we're going to be left behind in a society where our young people will not have the confidence to make this their home. They will leave, and they'll leave forever. And that's the risk, because if our young people continue to drain out of this country, we're losing the life of this country as we know it. So we need to wake up urgently to this, and I hope that this particular conference today tackles these issues and brings good solutions, which I know it will, and that there will be more interaction, etc. here. So thank you for putting up with my rant, but everything I said is honest, and everything I said is factually correct. So I just want you to know that these are the things that need to be said, and I will be saying a lot more of this from now on. So thank you.